Hi, welcome to Mindful Conversations After Hours. My guest today is Sherry Genga. She is the author of this book called The Shattered Oak. Sherry, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Greg.
I just read this afternoon and I couldn't put it down. It's a wonderful story.
Thank you so much.
Now, this is not your story. You didn't write this as an autobiography. This is a story of who?
It's actually a story of my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a story of her life. It's based on a true story. The story flashes back from present to past.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about dysfunctions in childhood and then dysfunctions in her adulthood,
Mm-hmm.
which becomes a mental illness.
Right. And there's a twist at the end. In fact, I had you on a show called Mindful Conversations like 6 months ago. You didn't tell me the ending, and then today I read it, and I was amazed by the shift. We won't talk about that now, maybe if we have time. So you named this book, The Shattered Oak, and it says, Overcoming Domestic Abuse and the Misdiagnosis of Mental Illness. Now, anyone that would look at this would probably see the tree here and look at it and say, why the shattered oak? So tell us the story behind the story.
Sure. The oak tree, I'm not sure if people are aware, is the symbol of strength.
Oh, yeah.
So my mother was shattered, broken, detached. The tree, we talk about her feelings are incorporated in the tree.
Mm-hmm.
So as you read the book in certain chapters, when she's going through a hard time, she might be mentioning the tree. My insides are feeling like the detached branch on the tree. It's dangling, trying to hold on and survive. As the tree gets hit by Mother Nature, my mother's also getting abused from domestic violence.
Right.
So throughout the book, her tree becomes this huge core strength, and it helps her throughout the story. And until the ending, you realize what the tree really had.
So it's a metaphor.
Symbol.
It's a metaphor. It's parallel to her life.
Yeah, her feelings.
Now, did she ever mention that to you, the tree, or did you make this up?
No, we just had a grand old tree in our yard that had a tire swing on it.
Okay.
And this tire swing, she uses that as, feelings too. The wind hits it and it's,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So a lot has to be said about a person's past here.
Mm-hmm.
And on page 109, I believe it is, you're talking about the fact that your mother and also your dad had really abusive backgrounds, dysfunctional families. And that was one of the reasons perhaps they came together, because it was familiar. How important is that to understand one's childhood, background, history, being aware of it, do you think?
That's a great question. It really has a great importance, because you get attracted to whoever you grew up with, and this way you can accept each other's faults, because you both had faults growing up.
So it's almost like a magnet. You find somebody and you go,
yeah, look at your friends.
You're familiar.
Yeah.
If it's abusive, if it's positive, if it's negative, you just feel like it's home.
Yeah.
But you're recreating the past.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Unfortunately, my mother never knew he had a temper,
Yeah. Well, he was very charismatic.
Yeah.
His name was Innocent.
Yes.
Now, I read that. Is that a pen name or is that for real?
No, that's his real name.
And what was his nickname?
Innie, they called him. And
okay.
he got teased in school for that unique,
Yeah.
different name.
But this guy wasn't a loser. Like when I read the story, he was very charismatic.
Yeah.
He was very flirtatious.
Yeah.
He was very powerful. He was a preacher, but he didn't have the opportunity to preach in a church because he also had problems with alcohol.
Right. Well, his father was a preacher.
Okay.
And so he grew up always hearing scriptures from God.
Okay.
And so as we grew up, he used those scriptures, Innocent,
Right.
used those scriptures on us to give us positive attitude too.
Right. Well, what was your impression of him as a little child? I know this is your mom's point of view, but what's your concept? What do you remember about him?
Oh, my father, he was great to us, even though he was alcoholic and abusive, very abusive to my mother. But he still cherished his children as best as he tried, he knew how.
Right.
I don't hold any resentment or hate.
Right.
Because I think I understand that people's past makes sometimes who they are today in the present. And it's not always your fault how you are, you know. They only learn from what they got learned, you know.
Sure. But he had a hard past. I mean, they grew up in a family where they didn't have a lot of money, below
poor.
poverty,
Yeah.
very poor. He had to go fetch for water. They had an outhouse.
Yeah.
He had to put parts together to put together a bicycle because he didn't have any assets or money or anything like that.
Right.
It was
It was
tough
very
life.
tough.
Yeah.
And same with my mother.
Okay.
So my mother, she was never accepted in the family. She had another brother and a sister who the parents loved and cherished. But my mother literally was Cinderella, 100%. You know, they wouldn't buy her clothes. They never, they just worked her, and she had to work outside, and you know, they'd give her a beating here or there. She had to make her clothes out of potato sacks as a kid.
Okay.
And then she'd go to school, and the kids would tease her for these, you know, itchy, scratchy outfits that she would have on. And she could never understand why she was not loved.
I understand now because I read the end of the book. And we won't talk about that right now. But so she had this concept that she was an outsider or not loved or not part of the real family. And then she finds someone that's very charismatic, very loving, almost like a Prince Charming. And then he turns on her because he's talking to or she's talking to somebody else. Is that how it all unfolds at the beginning?
Oh, in the beginning, yes.
Yeah.
Well, she finds out his temper before she gets married.
Okay.
He punches out her windshield, and then she realizes he has a temper, but she still loved him, so she decided to go through with the marriage anyway.
And then she finds out that he was married for 3 days.
Yes, before.
Right. And so he's hiding secrets.
Yes, he's not as innocent as so she thinks he is.
Interesting. So he has a dark side to him.
Yes, yep.
So what happens once she wakes up and realizes this isn't the man that she thought he was? What goes on in her mind? Does she try to get out of it right away? Does she just submit to it? What happens?
You know, when you have 4 children and you don't have a job, and it was back in the 70s, you're kind of forced just to go through the motions and have, you know, she just had to put up with his abuse, and you know, the cops would come, but then they would only stay for the day and they leave, and you know, he had his ways to make her stay home where she could never leave. He was a mechanic, so he used to rip out her distributor wires to make her stay home.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
And so, you know, he had his ways to make her stay there. But she finally, after so many abuses and so many, you know, it started getting a little bit, the generation, it was in the 80s.
Right.
They started, people had to pay for their actions.
The laws changed.
Laws changed.
Right, and women had more rights.
Yes.
And they could call an attorney,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, so she had to try to find an attorney. She had no money for an attorney, but the attorney knew that because he was he did own a nice company.
He was a successful business. This man wasn't just sitting on the couch drinking all the time.
Yeah.
So he did very well. What do you think was the motivation to drive him to be successful?
Childhood, absolutely.
Because he didn't have it then? Or he wanted to provide?
He just always had the drive. My father's definitely an entrepreneur.
Okay. Is he still alive?
He is.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Yeah,
And you don't mention last names. You don't get into any of those details.
Yeah.
But he's still alive. Do you still have a relationship with him?
Yeah. Oh
you
my
do?
gosh, he's a great guy.
Has he read the book?
No.
Oh, does he know that the book is out?
No.
Oh, he doesn't. Do you know people are going to be watching this?
I know.
And they could search your name?
Yes. Oh, well, let's not give any ideas, Greg.
I didn't know that at all. Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. Now, the reason I say this, here's the interesting thing.
Yes.
In the book, your father talked about secrets.
Yes.
And he said, secrets stay in the house. It's a business. Now, here you're holding a secret from your dad. Isn't that interesting?
But it's this book is not really about me. It's not about him. It's created more from my mother and for the fact of domestic abuse, suicide, to help people. Because, you know, why she was home with my father, she was very suicidal.
3 times, right? She tried to take her life once with medication.
Yeah, nervous breakdown.
Nervous breakdown.
I mean, all the women, you know, who are getting abused, you feel like you have no self-worth.
Right.
So you go through this downward spiral.
Sure.
And she finally finds the courage to, you know, to move away from him.
She literally puts a barrier in the bedroom. So she has a separate place to be. And she also realizes that he's not faithful and he's got other people. And so the marriage pretty much just falls apart.
Right.
And then how does she find this attorney that supports her?
I'm not really sure. She just kind of, I think it was like a local attorney, somebody advised to her. And I mean, that was a turning point in her life, but it really still wasn't, because now you have the after effects.
Exactly. When it's over, it's not over.
It's
She's
not
still
over. She's still fearful
depressed,
for her life, too.
survival.
Yeah, she's still fearful that one day he might still hurt her or kill her, or who knows. So she deals with that, and all that stress makes her even more suicidal, and she has a hard time dealing with the children.
Right.
You know, so she's very a faithful woman. She believes in God.
Right.
And
Even when she's taking her life with the medication, she's talking about the rosaries. She's talking about praying to God, asking for forgiveness. And it's interesting that she has that mentality going into it. She just wants the pain to go away, and she sees herself as the sacrifice.
Right. And I think
which is amazing.
Right. And I think people, when they're going through so much pain, they don't know how to deal with it. So they feel they can make that something, they're thinking that it's a sacrifice, and let me, go through with this act, and God will, forgive me for it.
Right. So there's abuse in their backgrounds, but there's a turn, and that has to do with the fact that she goes into a mental hospital, because in the state of Connecticut during that time, if you took your life or tried to take your life at least, 3 times? Then it's mandatory that you're in a mental hospital, and you basically sign away all your rights. So now she's feeling desperate there because she can't be free.
Right. Yeah, the institution was a very dark day for my mother. She talked about it a lot. They stripped her of all her rights.
And it was for 1 year, right?
1 year.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
If you don't walk down the hallways correctly, you fold your arms. They put you in the padded room.
Straight jacket.
Straight jacket. They give you a lot of medication to make you just kind of be more lethargic and sit there and behave.
Yeah. So you don't have.
But you're getting therapy at the same time. But she always knew it wasn't a place for her.
Right.
You get transported in dark tunnels underground. She hated those tunnels. You're not with society. They don't want you with society because they're fearful that you'll escape. So you travel through underground tunnels to get to building in the compound.
Right. But what was the turnaround? Because it wasn't mental illness, right?
No.
It was not mental illness.
No.
So she was not diagnosed correctly, as your book talks about.
Right.
So what happened? How did that unfold?
Yeah, so that's neat. You always got to think outside of the box.
I love that.
Because, there's a lot of diseases that people might have signs and symptoms of depression or suicidal, or you might have other symptoms that you're like, the obvious is, oh, she's, depressed, or let me put her on lithium or whatever.
Sure.
But there's a lot of reasons why you could have these symptoms, and it could be a disease, and that's what ended up happening with my mother.
Right. And how did that unfold? How did the nurse see it, and what happened? That's a wonderful story.
Yeah, she might have been still in the institution to this day if it wasn't for this nurse. The nurse happened to read a new medical journal about a new disease back in the 80s of Cushing's disease. And it was a very new disease that the doctor Cushing's started realizing, and her signs and symptoms were so odd. Like a lot of people have it. It could be depression, suicidal thoughts, your face is puffy, your neck gets puffy, you have an extended belly, you bruise easy. All these things are such things that everybody has on their bodies. You might bruise easy and you don't think anything of it. So to go with Cushing's disease, you don't always, the symptoms are so common, you just not sure, it's really hard to get diagnosed until you get in the right package.
And it has to do with the adrenals, right?
Yeah, the adrenal glands,
so
your cortisol.
The cortisol, and the fact that she was under fight and flight, she was probably
her whole life. Right.
And after a while, your body just collapses, and she's looking for a way out. So it wasn't necessarily mental illness.
No, it ended up being her cortisol levels were too high.
Right.
So when you're stressed your whole life, she was stressed by being Cinderella, stressed by her marriage. It ended up making her have a tumor on her pituitary gland, and they did an operation and removed it, and she went to the special hospital in Maryland, Bethesda.
Bethesda, yeah, I used to live there.
Yeah, so that, Bethesda's a great institution.
It is, I know the
all
area.
All new diseases go there,
Yep.
And they're trying to cure all kinds of cancers. And so she became a medical history. They made a medical movie on her.
Oh, they did?
Yep. It wasn't all that easy there either. I mean, it was a beautiful place, but my mother did say it was hard.
Right.
Because you're pricked and you're progged every day. You got needles up you. They're trying new medicines on you. They're trying to find the right fit. So as much as it's a great journey that people get to now use because of these people who are in the hospital, it was definitely hard on her too because every day they just tried a new experiment on her.
Sure. So what was the motivation for you to write your mother's story? Is it to help men, women, children, people that are being abused, or people who are just having a hard time so that they feel that there's hope in the world? What was your motivation?
So I always knew since I was 18 years old that my mother's story was such a powerful, unique story. I wanted it to help for suicidal, for domestic violence.
Right.
She touches a lot of them, domestic violence. She touches nervous breakdown, divorces, mental illness, diseases. And it comes out to be such a nice, powerful story in the end.
Yes.
Where she gives you her positive energy, her positiveness in her words when you read the book, of how to, even if you are going through your own suicidal thoughts right now or depression, how to recover and help by using a journal too, right? Journaling.
She journaled.
Right,
Yeah.
journaling. And journaling is a great way to filter your fears, your regrets, your how to get the deep thoughts out of your mind and just put it down on paper to move forward in life.
I have a gratitude journal, and so since 2009, so here it is 2019, so for 10 years, a decade, every day I write down 7 things that I'm grateful for.
I love it.
So at the end of the year, you have 2,555 things. You look at it.
It's a beautiful.
It is, because you can look at your year. You can look at your decade.
Yeah.
Someone can say to me, what happened 3 years ago on this day,
Love it.
and I can look back and see it, and then you can leave it for other people when you're gone.
Yeah.
And you kind of see the flow of the emotions. And the other thing I like about it is it reminds you that everything is temporal. And everything passes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You hold on to something and you think it's everything, and then with time.
Time passes and it gets much better.
You see it differently. You see it differently. I got to tell you, this is a beautiful book. What would you say to folks who are struggling with either suicidal thoughts or in a domestic relationship that's bad, whether it's marriage or any relationship? What would you say to them?
Oh my gosh, there's so many great programs nowadays. You got to seek help. You got to seek help from a friend, a therapist, programs, because a lot of people. I think normally everybody suffers from depression or crazy thoughts in their mind. I know I've been through it. So really, just to seek help. I mean, don't hide from it. The longer you keep it inside, the worse it becomes.
So you don't want it to be a secret.
Yeah, and if you really feel like it needs to be a secret, maybe try to journal.
Right.
I know, for me it helped. If it helped for my mother, I'm a private person, so I didn't go to a therapist, but I definitely know journaling for a year got me right out of my suicidal depression state.
So you felt the same thoughts too?
Sure, when my mother was sick.
Okay.
Because so me and my sister lived alone while my mother was in the institution.
Who watched you? Who took care of you?
So my sister was 18. She became my legal guardian.
All right. How old were you?
13.
Okay. All right. So an 18-year-old is watching a 13-year-old.
Yep.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it was great. I mean, I wouldn't take it all back for anything.
Sure.
Gives you independence, and independence gives you strength.
Right.
Strength gives you hope, and it gets you through. And after all those, you learn to move on and go through life and put it behind you.
Sounds like the oak tree.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you want to tell us the surprise ending, or should we just leave it?
I think we should leave it.
Okay, so
yes.
when I interviewed you a couple months back, you didn't tell me the surprise ending.
Yes, yeah.
And so today I read the book, and then we talked about it before we started this. And it's a game changer in the sense that it's a paradigm shift. Because all the things that are going on in her mind and all of her history, she has a perception that she's not loved. And then later she realizes why that's so. And I think with anybody's life, that's true. We don't see the world as it truly is. I mean, you have siblings, I do too. They grew up in the same family that I grew up in, but they saw it differently, totally differently. You know what I mean?
And this is a great book for psychiatrists.
Yeah, tell me about the reviews you've been getting.
Oh my God, like on Amazon, you can go, under my book, The Shattered Oak, and I had this wonderful guy from Tennessee connect with me. He's been a psychiatrist, social worker for 30 years.
Sure.
And he actually rated my book right below Sophie's Choice, which got an 8 Grammy Award. There was a movie. And because I really go into the mind of the patient, whoever is going through, it's my mother,
Sure.
but I really get the deep thoughts that are characterized with her.
It's through her eyes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's written in the first person. So it really gives nurses, social workers, any kind of medical, a different look of how the patient's actually feeling.
Right, exactly.
It's very deep. It shows her fears.
Right.
You will go on a roller coaster ride as you're reading it. You will feel her suicide. You will feel her nervous breakdowns. You'll also feel how does she get out of those suicidal thoughts and how does she get out of those nervous breakdown feelings. So it'll bring you down, but it'll also bring you back up, and it tells you how she recovers.
It's a book of hope.
Hope.
So
Yeah.
whether you're just having a down day or you just want to read somebody's history,
Yeah.
And it's an easy read. It's not like
Very easy read.
Yeah.
And you can't. It's great. You should read it all in one sitting. It could take you 2 hours.
Right, exactly. Right, and it's a powerful book because
Emotional.
it is emotional,
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to find you, let's say they're struggling or they're in a position where they just need help, I'm assuming you're there, and you answer questions. How do people find you?
Oh, sure. Yep. Just go right on my website, www.theshatteredoak.com.
Okay.
I have an email right there.
Okay.
You can email me anytime. My book is there to purchase too, if you prefer. If
Sure.
you'd like to purchase.
Do you think it's going to be a movie?
I would love it to be a movie.
Right.
I honestly do. I think it's so profound. It's so unique. And when you really read about it, and even how it's incorporated with the oak tree and her feelings,
Yeah.
it really is just so emotional. It would just be, it would really help a lot of other people struggling from suicide. Robin Williams.
Yes.
He showed his mask. There's a lot of people who have a mask out there.
Right.
And
Especially with Facebook and
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah.
You look on these sites, you go, oh, look what this guy's doing, or look what she's doing, and it's all just a snapshot. It's fake. You don't see what goes on behind the scenes. It's like watching a movie or a television show.
Yeah.
You have no idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
It would be just as good as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or like I said, Sophie's Choice, which Tom Rutledge, he's out of Tennessee, wonderful guy. He wrote like 10 books himself. So like I said, you can go and see those reviews. They're fabulous.
Who would you
reviews.
want to play your mom? Have you thought about that?
Oh my gosh, that would be interesting.
Yeah. Meryl Streep?
Oh wow, that would be pretty
Why not?
impressive.
Who do you
Oh, I
think?
never really thought of that.
Well,
yeah, she would actually be great. That
Wait.
was really good.
Yeah, I actually met her in Yonkers like 10 years ago.
Yeah, she
was
would
on a
be
set.
wonderful. Yeah.
So we'll have to connect and find out if she's
Yeah.
available.
Yeah.
Get it written as a
Yeah,
screen.
you screenwriter. Yeah, so I have been. I've been trying to connect to screenwriters, playwriters,
Nice.
filmmakers. You never know.
You never know. You just
never
put it,
know.
You never.
So where the book takes, I figure the universe will bring it.
Right.
And it gets in the right hands of those who need help, and that's my first love. I just wanted to touch others, and and I know I've already helped a couple people. So if it helps more, that's all the blessing is.
What are the stories? Who have you helped?
I helped a lady in Texas. She was crying, and she told me how her husband had the same childhood dysfunctions, and he treated her the same way.
Wow.
So it was nice to have a connection there.
Wow. I notice in the back of the book you have resources, which
Yeah.
I think, it's not just a book about your mom. It's a great story, but at the very end, you have all these resources about domestic violence, suicide prevention. If someone wanted to get a hold of them,
Yeah,
or
sure.
how would they
Sure,
do that?
call 1-800-273-8255, and that's the National Suicide Prevention Line.
Excellent. Sherry, thank you so much. If you're struggling, if you're having any issues with suicide, or you're having any domestic violence issues or mental issues, definitely seek a professional. Get a hold of the book if you like as well. Sherry, thank you so much for being on the broadcast today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
It was. We'll have to do it again.
I will love it.